Sasha Awa. I have a passion for marketing. So many small businesses that I work with don't understand, appreciate marketing. I'm in the tech field. The soft skills, sales and marketing, often get overlooked and maybe just slightly disrespected. But as a company matures, sales is necessary. That's how the company is going to grow. Marketing is part of sales. That's my opening question with Sasha. She is a pure marketer. She was at the New York Times for a long time. She's got great stories there, but now she has her own agency that she opened up, and we just talk very openly about about marketing and how sales. My first question I ask her, what's the difference between sales and marketing? And we talk a lot about it. She's got 4 steps on her website, which starts with build and map, and the other 3 are very interesting. But it's a great discussion. I really enjoyed talking to Sasha. I always learn more and more. That's why I love having conversations with smart people. She's very engaging. She knows her stuff. She has passion for marketing, and it's wonderful. And there's a great energy about her. You're really going to enjoy this conversation. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pinz. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic. I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission, how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision, growth through learning from others. Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. Very, very excited to talk to you. Sasha Awa, thanks so much for your time today. What is the difference between marketing and sales?
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm almost opening up a little bit of a can of worms there
Good.
because for me, I think that marketing and sales should be a joined force, right? I think that as a marketer, your job isn't technically done just because you bring in X amount of leads into the funnel to support the sales team, right? So if we think about any company that has a sales team, whether it's majority of them would potentially be on the B2B side, so business to business, they are separated for the most part. It has historically been a little bit of a church and state separation, which I think is the wrong way to do it, right? I think that when a marketer supports the growth of the sales team and brings in leads in through the funnel, there should be a good sort of flow and ebb and flow between the sales and the marketing team. So while there is a big difference in terms of support. There is support from marketing to sales, but they're both doing acquisition in so many ways, right? Sales could be, going out and cold outreach and hunting for sales, versus marketing can help them in terms of farming for sales, right? So from a larger standpoint, and I think hunting, it's kind of like a one-off, and farming is like you're building more of a community and a sense of like trust from a warmer lead that may potentially come in through the funnel. Why have they been separated in multiple companies? It's just, I think, based on the structure of the company, based on the charter of the company, how they wish to kind of conduct their business. But I do think it is a huge loss if the two aren't connected. I think that they should potentially be reporting up to the same individual. So whether it is a large enterprise company that has a chief revenue officer, and that kind of thing, I think marketing and sales should be a funnel, separate departments, but in sync and support with each other in alignment to the same goal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and also just a blanket statement here. It's not the, uh, generalizing, of course, but even the motivation. I mean, generally speaking, marketers, are salaried employees. They get regular bonuses, etc. But the sales people are base plus commission. So
Sure.
they're just different kind of animals as far as compensation and how. So they're, and then of course we get into the whole used car sales and these kinds of things. But even the
Yeah.
motivation is different. So the people themselves are just different. So maybe that's why there's been a separation.
Maybe, but I think ultimately if you I mean, this is coming from my angle. If you think about marketing, I think of marketing as the nucleus and the centerpiece for any company because we
Mm,
are a support system, right? So yes, you are right. It is a very different animal in terms of mindset, right? You think real estate, you think pharma, you think any type of B2B company. It is a longer tail sales process for a B2B company versus a B2C, right? You technically don't see salespeople within B2C. It's more sort of customer relations and customer support and that kind of stuff. Not that you don't see it in B2B, but
mm,
that is, I think, the main difference between the setup of two different companies, right? So, in that sense, what is marketing doing to support sales to like close that deal, right?
mm,
So, we can support them from the standpoint of bringing them additional leads that are warmer and not necessarily them just going out and hunting for leads, right? So that's where I mentioned the farming versus hunting. But then we can also support them from the standpoint of, what are their decks look like? What are their sales sheets look like? What are their promo materials look like? How can we make them look better at what they do because they're the mouthpiece to the company, but then
mm.
the collateral and the leave behind is everything that's built from the marketing team,
Ah.
right? So then at the same time, it's like if there is a disjoint and the two teams don't communicate with each other, that's when I mean that it is a huge mess. Like they're obviously separate departments, but in essence, they're running and chasing towards the same goal, right? So we as marketers need feedback from sales when we've supported you to bring in leads. We need the feedback cycle of, 50% of them were a crapshoot. These aren't going to work out and here's why. Or I've been having conversations with people and this came up, so maybe we should include that in our marketing material, right? So that ebb and flow is going to support to really hone in and make that salesperson better at their job to close the deal because then we can provide them with the collateral and the marketing pieces that they need to take it further, if that makes sense.
Mm.
But yes, you're right. The mindset is very different.
But we got to close that gap somehow because even so, I work with a lot of tech companies, right? Smaller businesses
Yeah.
that go B2B, and we can even take it one step further, where then sales and engineering, they get mad at sales because sales is selling them stuff that they can't do, and sales gets mad at engineering because they're not doing things that they say they can, and then you have the dispute between sales and marketing. Well, marketing isn't giving us great leads, and marketing says, well, they're not good enough to close them, and so there's all these kinds of gaps, and the solution to that is what?
Communication.
Yeah.
It's the root of everything. I mean, and it's like they're not communicating with each other. And there needs to be set sort of processes in place where it's like this is engineers lane, this is sales lane, this is marketing's lane, and how do we kind of have that Venn diagram where like we all meet in the middle, and what
Mm,
is that main goal? And obviously the main goal is sales. My job is not done as a marketer just because I brought in leads, right? I mean, I'll give you an example. When I was at a legacy company that started to buy out a bunch of tech startups and ventured into sort of like the tech startup worlds just because of the technology that they incorporated into the company, there was a major disconnect from sales, marketing, and then customer service.
mm,
I'm at a loss if I bring in a lead, sales closes it, and then customer service fails to keep them.
hmm,
And we were having churn at like 2 months. Somebody is like, I don't want to do this anymore and cancel. So there was a missing link there. So sales and marketing had to communicate with each other, take a flight down to where our headquarters were in Ohio and have a conversation with what was happening with onboarding and the whole sort of retention piece. Because marketing, yes, is acquisition, sales is also acquisition and closing. But then ultimately, we need to make sure the retention piece is happening because otherwise we're wasting money. So there needs to be communication. And historically, there hasn't been a lot of communication between the departments. And it's like marketing does their job. They think their job ends here. They pass it on to sales. Sales thinks their job ends here. And then it goes on to to whoever is going to onboard them and take care of that client and kind of build that relationship with. And that is good in the sense of like you understand where your lanes are, but in terms of that nucleus and that Venn diagram and what is common between us is a miscommunication between a lot of companies who have these departments. And the bigger they get, the more there
Mm.
is a gap in terms of communication.
And I've heard of some cases, Sasha, where they have to spend it. I think it was that shoe company that Amazon bought. I can't remember their name
Oh,
right.
Zappos?
Zappos, yeah, where
Yeah.
everybody had to spend a week or a couple days in every other department,
Walk a
right?
mile in their
Yeah,
shoes.
they walk
Yeah.
around in their shoes, yeah, so they
Yeah.
can get a taste of
And what were they known for? They were known for their amazing customer
customer
service.
service.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It goes back to like a department store like Nordstrom's. There was a book that I read that was, I think it was called Customer First. And Nordstrom's doesn't even sell tires, but this one dude walked in and was like, I'm returning these tires. And they ended up taking them. I mean, that's insane to me. But I mean, it's just a level of customer satisfaction. You buy something, you try it on, you maybe use it once, you don't like it. Nordstrom's isn't going to ask you a
yeah.
question, right? And I think larger companies can have the opportunity to do that. IKEA does that. They have really good like return policy, customer service. Zappos like went through the roof because of
Yeah.
their customer service. And it's like, I purchased from you once. I have that euphoric experience. I'm of course going to tell everybody else about it, right? So in that B2C and direct to consumer, there is that bond between the customer team and then the marketing team, because we've got to also support them. And then whatever is like on the website, communication pieces, that all stems from marketing. So if you think about it, that's why I say, and I always like to say, like, we're the head of the octopus, and then the tentacles are like the other departments. And it's not to say that marketing runs the show. We don't, because it's this constant ebb and flow and feedback that has to come back. If we ultimately want to think about who's before marketing, if you are in a larger company, it's the R&D team, it's research and development,
Mm.
right? But still marketing needs to have a seat in that department. And I think that again, it really goes back to communication.
And the website, that's marketing's responsibility.
The website is marketing's responsibility, but we can build the website to be a sales enablement tool for our
Mm.
sales team, right? So a lot of what, I was doing in the past is like, as I mentioned to you, like leave behind sales decks and so on and so forth. But how do we make it even easier? Because it's in our best interest to have whatever prospect or customer return back to our site and get familiar with our products and service from our website. So if sales in a
Mm.
call, in a Zoom, can all of a sudden leverage the site to pull up X, to walk them through Y, to kind of say, here, you can download this after our meeting and send them a link, then that saves sales from having to dig into like Google Drive, pull out a file, send a file, and so on and so forth, right? So yes, marketing will run the show in terms of building the website, but it's in support a majority of times when we call it like a sales enablement tool to support sales from that standpoint.
So I work with a lot of tech companies, and most of them are engineer led. So a great engineer is very good, and so decided to start a company. What is the one book where it's like entrepreneurial head rush or head
Yeah.
seizure or something? But
Yeah.
and they don't have sales skills. They even kind of, I don't want to say disrespect, but they don't have as much respect for those kind of soft skills as they do for engineers, because they're engineers. So their company kind of struggles for a while. Then they soon realize, okay, the only way we're going to grow is to have sales. And
Yeah.
then they're not even introduced. They don't know the difference between sales and marketing. So they hire a salesperson. And I was guilty of this, Sasha. I did it in the
Yeah.
90s. I just hired a salesperson and do marketing too. So, anybody who's listening, who's like one of these startups that's, doesn't know sales, doesn't know marketing well, what do they need to do?
What do they need to do in terms of growing their business?
Yes.
Yeah. So the way I operate with my clients is I work in a three-part process, right? And I simplify marketing for clients and entrepreneurs and small business owners so that they can launch successfully without wasting money. And what do I
Mm,
mean by that? A lot of the times, I mean, marketing is a crowded space. It's loud, and it's getting louder with a layer of AI. And
yeah.
God knows what else is going to sidebar us, on top of AI. But at the end of the day, your foundation is where you start. And so for me, that phase one is ensuring that your house is in order. And what do I mean by that? If you get marketed to by a company that's like, I can give you 10x clients month over month, or I can boost your social media by 5,000 followers in a month, and so on and so forth. So that's what's happening to startups and founders, and they're like, oh my god, like I'm a lost tourist in a crowded city,
Hmm.
and everyone's coming at me and I don't know who to ask direction for, right? So it's that simple. Without the tools and the knowledge to know how to navigate this matrix of marketing, it becomes extremely confusing,
Hmm.
right? And I've built this matrix to not distill down, but in essence, yes, to distill down, where it's like phase one is, again, your foundation in your house. And I don't care if something crazier comes out outside of AI, you're still going to always need to go back to your foundation. And what does that mean? Is your website in order? Is the way you're communicating your business in order? Meaning, if you sell bikes, tell people you sell bikes. Don't tell them you sell the wind that blows through their hair.
Mm,
Because
mm,
a lot of the times when I work with founders, they try to come up with this elaborate like headline on their website that just further confuses people once they land there, right? Is your website kind of user experience from top to bottom, allowing that person to do what you want them to do, which is fill out a form, call, whatever it is, purchase, right? What is that funnel? And if that's all not in order, if your website also hasn't been built with keywords in mind that's going to support you from an organic SEO standpoint, as well as like local SEO, then that's also having you launch something that is at a stage where you're going to have to take a step back and you're going to have to recreate all the content, right? Do you know who your target audience is? Everybody thinks that they have a primary audience. That's great, but you're definitely going to have a secondary, potentially a third, a tertiary audience as well. Maybe there's somebody who's buying the product for your main audience, but they're the one that has the money to purchase it, right? If we think about a hospital, maybe if they need to train their staff on X, the hospital coordinator for nurses or doctors, whatever, is going to be our target audience, who's actually going to buy it for the secondary layer of who's actually going to use the product or service,
hmm.
right? So ensuring that that phase one is in order is extremely key prior to spending any money in market. Because if it's not, you're just throwing darts in the dark, right? But again, you also need to understand, are you B2C? Are you B2B? Referral marketing is becoming something that it's almost like we're taking a step back post COVID. There's a sense of community that people want to have. It's a sense of community, whether it's online communities, whether it is in-person communities. But there's this sense of, I need to trust your brand if I'm going to associate myself and build an affinity towards that brand, right? So
Hmm.
even if you are in a service industry, like I have um, a doctor office in New York, for me, the more bang for their buck is that we hired somebody to do social and somebody to do social growth hacking. And then we also hired somebody that's kind of like a pharma rep salesperson to go around in our radius around our office and start introducing ourselves. Now, this is a business that has been in business for 20 years, but it's like now we need to go, because they offer physical therapy, chiro, they do stem cells. That's why they're a medical office. They do nutrition and all that kind of stuff. So now it's going around our radius within our office and handshaking, creating relationships so that we can get referrals.
Hmm.
That's a warmer lead than putting an ad in front of somebody when we don't have a huge marketing budget. The other medical facility next to us may have a bigger marketing budget and kill our ad placement because they're spending more money.
Hmm.
So that is the competitive atmosphere. But if you go and you start to meet and build relationships, then that's a different process. So, really, a long answer to your question is understand what type of product and service you're selling, know who your target audience is and where to reach them, because it's either you could be doing some amazing things online and social is where it's at and where you need to create that audience for yourself, or you need to have feet on the street. I mean, similar to a pharma rep, or similar to, you remember back in the days when Red Bull launched and they had all
Right.
these college kids in universities. That was brilliant, but they brought it back to like a Mary Kay type of situation,
Mm.
So
You mentioned one point, like if you're a bike shop, say that you sell bikes. Nike has a very interesting, philosophy as far as marketing, where they really don't talk about their product. They talk more about the athlete and how much better you can be as an athlete with
yeah.
product. It's so how that's a very interesting kind of take. What's your feeling on that?
Yeah, so what they're doing is there's a guy that wrote Story Brand. His name is Donald Miller. He's kind of known in the marketing industry. But what he said is that you have to position your audience as the hero.
Hmm,
And you, whatever you're offering, whether it's a service, product, or tool, is the guide to make them accomplish their goals.
interesting.
So that's what Nike's doing, is that they're positioning you and myself, so Joe and Sasha, we're the heroes of their product.
Hmm,
If we wear their shoes, it's going to make us more comfortable, which is going to not hurt our bodies when we go on a mile run or a 10K run or like whatever it is. So, yes, I think putting your audience as the hero ahead of just selling your product
hmm.
and leveraging that pain point of what it's going to make them feel and how it's going to improve their life is where the content needs to be placed for sure.
Yeah, and it's genius. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I work with tech companies, and I see some of their marketing material, and it's so feature rich. Sasha, I said,
Yeah.
Nobody cares about features; they want value. What's the
Yes.
value to them? They don't care if it's got 20 reports and big buttons to press. What value is it going to bring? And it's a very
Yeah.
different mindset.
Yeah. That feature comes if it's a tech company that has like a three pricing tier, like whether you're buying into, the lowest, the mid to the high. And it's typically marketers do three because people tend to buy the middle one because
Mm,
it's, and if no matter what site you go on, it will always say the most popular one is the middle one, right?
right.
And so that is the one that has the most rich featured and it's baked in that way to offer up what makes the most sense for that money to make a return on investment, right? So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it's you are right. People sell their product and they don't sell the audience's pain point
Right.
that mesh again with their product and service that they're offering because obviously you're in business because you have seen a gap in the market, right? You see a gap that needs to be filled, that needs to be supporting who your hero is and who your audience is. So support them and tell them this is why I created this product for you, for people like you, because of XYZ pain points that you're dealing with, and this is going to help solve them.
Yeah, and these studies that I read, Sasha, about marketing, about anchoring. When you walk into Costco, they have the expensive TVs first. So, that way you're not going to spend that much. You're still going to spend, but you're not going to spend as much as that big TV was. And you look at the smaller ones and
Yeah.
the way they have a Coca-Cola machine in a campus and by itself. And it makes $100 a day. And then they put a Pepsi machine next to it. And then they both make $200 a day because the question isn't, am I going to have a drink? The question is, am I going to have soda? Am I going to have Coke or Pepsi?
Pepsi,
I mean,
yeah.
all of these studies in restaurants that are placed near each other, you would think, oh, there's so much competition but actually they all help each other because now the question is, I'm going to eat just which one. And all
Yeah.
this marketing, it's so brilliant. And this is all really developing you have 4 steps on your website. And your first one is build that we're kind of talking about
Yeah.
now, build and map. And all those studies really help on developing and planning your value.
Yeah, because again, it's going back to how do you find your audience? Where is your audience? And then how do
Mm,
you get in front of your audience? Again, it also goes back to the fact that it's such a noisy place. I mean, we're connected to our TV, we're connected to our phones. We go out on the street, there's billboards, there's signage, we're listening to a podcast, there's advertisements on the podcast. So throughout our day, there is a multitude of a variety of different touch points that we're being hit with. So that's why it's like it goes back to to the Nielsen study that it takes a consumer 7 times to see your brand before they actually convert,
oh,
right? So
fantastic.
you need to make sure that the first thing that you do is how are you capturing somebody? If you're spending money to bring people to your website, a success metric at that point is capturing an email address because that is your owned land. You
Mm,
own that email address. You don't
mm,
own people on social media because you don't have a way to communicate with them other than on a platform that's not yours,
mm,
right? But when they come into your system, and they've filled out a form, then that platform is yours and you're free to do whatever you want and to communicate with them however you want, which
mm.
the primary piece is either email, and then if they've signed up to receive text message marketing, right? So that's the concept of what I call build your list to sell to your list.
Hmm.
And that becomes lucrative because if you have a list, I mean, that's the cheapest form of marketing once you have a new product in place, right? Or it's like if you think about all these influencers, they are building their followers to sell to their followers. So that's a new term outside of what email marketing was. But that doesn't always work for every company. If you're a B2B company and you're selling refrigerators, you may not necessarily need to be on Instagram unless you're like that cool British refrigerator. I forget what the brand name is.
Hmm.
But it depends. Like what's your aesthetic? How do you communicate, and really how are you breaking through the noise? And that's your value proposition. What makes you different? I mean, you can learn from your competitors, but then what's the key takeaway? What's the one thing they're not talking about that you should be talking about?
Mm.
And it's not like I go back to Red Bull, which is a product that I don't love, but I think that they've coined every aspect of marketing. And what made them different? It's a crappy taste. It really has like a hard crash, and no offense to anybody listening who is a diehard Red Bull drinker,
I agree
but
with you.
yeah, but at the end of the day, they nailed it because they had a bunch of like cute college kids running around, girls and guys that were appealing to their peers.
Mm.
And they were like, I am working for this company. And so there was an automatic trust. Red Bull's face was not there other than just the branding because they were putting students on campus to talk to their fellow students. And that was brilliant. I mean, they brought back door knocking, from the 60s and put them on campus. And that's what made them different was their way of communicating. It's not like the taste or the energy was anything different to what was already out in market, but they just knew how to penetrate better, right?
But they created a whole market. I mean, that whole soft drink, I don't know what the classification that is, high caffeine, whatever.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of them now, right? I don't drink any of them, but I see
Yeah.
the kids today with them all, and
Like
they're really
Monster drink and I
yeah,
don't know
all
what.
those.
Yeah.
Sure. They really, so your first step is to build, your next step is to map and plan. It's
Hmm.
kind of about what we're talking about now.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so like once you have a foundation in place and like, oh, let's not forget about your marketing tech stack, right? And what do I mean by that? It's like if you have your website, um, if you built your website and you're collecting emails, you obviously need to ensure that that's connected to whether it's like a HubSpot or a MailChimp, however it is, whether you're building your forms from like, your WordPress or your Squarespace that then is connected to your CRM system. There needs to be a way for you to be collecting information. And then you also need to make sure that your Google Analytics is switched on, that your search Google is switched on, which means like that's how you can start to track the different keywords. I mean, and SEO is a whole other like can of worms in terms of getting that set up. But your site is going to show up organically if you have keywords in your pages that resonate with what somebody is searching organically, right? And that's why content is king on websites as it relates to blogs. Like a lot of people probably don't read blogs, but if they're searching for something and that keyword is in that blog, then your site is going to show up,
Yeah.
right? So the map and planning happens once all of that foundation is in a good place. You have the ability to track a lead from sign up all the way through to a sale. And now is the time to look at, well, how are we going to spend money, right? And it's really building out, what does your budget look like, because you need to understand what is your threshold for how much you're willing to spend for each lead that comes in through the funnel,
Mm.
right? I worked for another startup where, I mean, you could consider them a data platform, but they were a company that had penetrated the market and offered a unique space to get in front of clients, right? So they were an like a free box delivery of sample products, right? So we worked with like big box companies, like consumer packaged good companies, like Clairol, like snack bar companies, you name it, right? And so what we used to do is like, let's say for example, Clairol came out with a new hair color, right? And they would come to us. We had X million people in our database, but every single person in that database has filled out a form that had 25 different fields.
Hmm.
So if Clairol came to us and said, I want to connect with a mom that's single, that has two kids under the age of 4, that has a dog, like whatever it is,
Wow.
then we have the data on this person, right? And we're like, okay, that person this month is going to get that sample of hair color, right? But what we couldn't do was we couldn't afford to spend more than 75% per lead that signed up to our box because it was free. The end consumer wasn't spending. So where were we making our money? On the
Mm,
samples that were going in our boxes. So we measured out based on like the lifetime value, which is your LTV, to understand what is somebody's lifetime from the day they sign up and how long they're going to stay on, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5 months, right? And if Jane Doe signs up and lasts for 4 months and she's getting samples every month, then that's a high quality lead that I have in through my system. She matches across the board for every product that I place in that box, right? And 75% was the max that we could generate in terms of bringing on a lead, and it would take us up to 2 months to make that back. So that's where you also need to understand from a budgetary, it's back of the napkin calculation. What is my goal from a month to month basis and quarterly, and then you could potentially put down yearly as well, even if you're just starting up, to figure out, okay, this is how much I can start to spend. And it's test and learn. Now that you have an amazing product, it doesn't mean that you're going to sell, because the market is iffy on everything, right?
mm,
And people are iffy, especially when it's something new. Like, I want to see how many followers do they have? What's the reviews? Like, is this something I can trust? So it's going back to ensuring that you start to do like little tests in terms of messaging to understand, is this message resonating? Are people clicking on this and converting? Are they signing up, or are they actually purchasing, right? And that's where the iterations shouldn't feel frustrating, because just because you've launched and now you have traffic coming, but there's no conversion, that doesn't mean that it's not successful. You
mm.
need to measure your successes in increments, right? Are people clicking around the site? Did they give me their email? Great. Did they sign up? Not necessarily, but how long did it take them to, right? So that mapping and planning is just knowing where you want to put your funds towards finding your audience. And then it's going out and testing and learning the market and how it's responding to what you're offering.
Mm.
And then you build from there. And then the analytics, the data, is what's going to tell you how well you're doing at that point. It's the pressure test, right?
Yes, certainly is. You spent time at the New York Times, and you were head of a lot of great projects there, Sasha, like the gaming, the
The crossword
podcast,
app.
yeah,
Yeah.
the crossword app, and and I heard a story once you were saying how you were given a low budget to do something great, and it was challenging there at the New York Times. Tell me about it.
Yeah. So just because companies are enterprise companies doesn't mean that they have a ton of money. And I and
Mm,
I met and I actually met somebody at a conference that worked for Red Bull, and she also told me that they didn't have a lot of money to spend for marketing, right? But I think it's fun because you get creative in the sense of like, well, what can I do with less and get more return,
hmm,
right? And that's why it's like, you know, even as an enterprise, we launched the crossword app. I also launched the food app, NY Times, food, and then we started our podcast with taking the column Modern Love and creating it into a podcast, and then eventually after I left, it became a Netflix series. But the one thing that we had going for ourselves was that we had an audience already. We had a database of people that we could sell to, right? But obviously, you don't want to stay stagnant in terms of who you're just selling to. You want to grow your audience, right? So, for example, we had kind of like a TED Talks series that were happening every so often, and I was basically given $1,000 to fill the seats. I mean, $1,000 is nothing to do any type of marketing. So I said, forget the money. I started calling a bunch of universities, a bunch of affiliations, and to start to say, how can I get on your list? How can I sell my product and what I'm offering to your list? And so it was an exchange, right? So it's like I would get on their list, they would promote me to their list, and then maybe I would do something for them, and so on and so forth,
hmm,
right? So that is kind of like a cross sell in terms of, how marketers can work with each other to benefit from each other's list. And it goes back to what I say, build your list to sell to your list, because that becomes your most valuable real estate in that sense. So you don't have to have a huge budget to start. I mean, I worked with somebody who was an independent solopreneur that was offering financial support to single moms. And I told her, I said, get out into your community. And I said, find out where your single moms are hanging out. And I said, and that's where you're going to make your sales. And she did. And within like a month, she made $10,000,
Hmm.
so with no money, just basically attending and inserting herself into the communities of where her target was.
Your third step or stage is align stakeholders, and that's kind of what you were doing there when you were calling the universities, etc.
Yeah. So aligning stakeholders, and then really it's kind of like the analytics piece is, it's ensuring that everybody is in line with the marketing plan before you go
Mm,
to market, right? So
mm.
again, it goes back to our original conversation of like sales and marketing. This is what we're going to do to support you guys to close your monthly goals, right? Because sales has goals just like a company has goals. So what are we going to do if you want to make $300,000 in Q1? What do I need to do to get you to that $300,000, right? And is that revenue? Is that whatever it is? So then I need to go and do some back of the napkin calculations to figure out, let's test these different platforms at a minimal budget. And if we see something that's working, let's put full force behind that, right? So that's what I mean by alignment. Getting everybody involved, whether it's you and one other person at a startup, or whether it's you and like a team of 25 at an enterprise company, but it's getting the green light to start to go out and test and to see what's happening. And then, as I mentioned, your marketing tech is going to help you understand how everything is working in the end. And the data is king. Whatever the data says is what's happening, right? So it's going to tell you where you should put your money and where you should roll your dice.
Yeah, yeah, and it's very important to get everybody on board. We talked about, like you say in the beginning, getting sales involved, getting everybody on board. Your last stage is implement and optimize. And we talked earlier. You mentioned about how AI is making the space even more crowded. How do you think AI is going to play a role in marketing?
So already as a marketer myself, I'm getting like ads where it's like, for agencies, white label us for like $25 and we'll run your client's SEO, right? So I have a friend who is a food blogger, and like sometimes I'll punt stuff to her and I'm like, "Oh, I was like, hey, I was like, why don't you just test this out?" Cuz she's got a smaller audience and it's like, she doesn't have a huge budget. So let's see if it's working. And a lot of this stuff is not there yet. I mean, I don't know how long it's going to take because it's so tricky with AI. I think what AI is supporting right now and doing really well in is supporting from a processes standpoint. Like
Mm.
they're helping me get organized with my schedule. They're helping me do things a little faster throughout my day. They're maybe helping me not work 12 hours a day, but I've shaved off, 3 hours in my day because something that AI is doing from a process standpoint is allowing me to move through that. Now, do I think AI is going to be able to take my clients build my clients creative, create a Facebook campaign, launch it, monitor it,
Mm,
monetize it, and then
mm.
pump out? It can. I think so. But I think that there's been pieces of that AI has developed. Like AI is winning, for example, in when I was at the Times, actually, before like the storm of AI came, we contracted this company whereby it would take our original creative, it will upload it into a system, and then give us seven different pieces of that creative based on the algorithm of Facebook, right? On
Wow.
what people had already been clicking on. And who did it piss off? It pissed off our creative department because our creative department was like, I can't believe this machine is winning over me. And then what does that mean for me? You know what I mean? Like, how am I going to start
Mm,
creating things? So,
mm.
yeah, AI in the sense can help because it's connected to the back end of data and can kind of see how the system works. But then is that at a D does that not help Facebook? Because Facebook doesn't want you to know their backend algorithm because they keep wanting you to spend money,
Right.
right? So it's a very like double-edged sword. So I think it's moving in a good direction, but I mean, you notice like even creative that's, been done by AI, you know what it looks like versus
Yeah.
when it's actually been done by a human. And I think that right now, if we want to talk about organic SEO at a very high level, it's a war between Google and Microsoft,
Right.
and they go through their Google goes through their changes every day because they're like, if you have AI copy on your website that's been written by ChatGPT, we're not going to index your site. And so then basically you don't show up, so it's like they're fighting to keep the humanized copy on your website. So it's we're at a disadvantage with these companies that are having a full-on war with each other, so
Absolutely amazing. I see those ads all the time too, Sasha,
yeah.
it's got to catch up to them, right? Because people are going to sign on for a month or two, then jump off.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are they hoping the
Totally.
AI gets better for those 2 months, and will I don't know, get them at a low area or low entry point, and then start charging them more? It's a crazy time right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because I was talking to a friend of mine who used to work for a family fund in the VC world, and her and I were actually chatting about AI, and she said when I would get when she used to work for them, and she said when I would get AI pitches, she's like, the one thing I looked for in an AI tech company was, how is it changing X? Like, whatever you're doing, does it actually have a transformational aspect in the end, right? So
Mm.
she's third generation, and she's like, okay, if an AI landed on me and it said that, it's going to leverage and do something even better than what Google Translate does, and it's more automated and automatic, that can help my mom learn how to speak better English, then that's something that I would be interested in. It's like, what is the transformational aspect of what a company is offering? And I think that's with AI. It's like, how are you helping my life? How are you enhancing my life with AI?
Hmm. To be determined, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's all TBD. So going back to when I said managed service provider, he maybe that was the okay. That's funny. They should hire salespeople and outsource marketing. Yes or no?
Who should hire?
I'm
Ask me
talking.
that question again.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry about that.
These small tech firms that I work with. So this outsourced IT, these managed service
Oh,
providers I work with,
yeah.
so they probably don't. They have a very limited sales team. They're service. They're regional. So
Yes.
do they need a full time sales? They need full time marketing.
So again, it depends. Like, I think, like, it depends whether you're B2B or B2C, right? And I
All B
think
two
that
B. All B two B.
all
These
B2B.
all B2B. Yeah.
So if it's B2B, then yes, I think hiring, you can start from a junior to mid level hire, but then also we can think about, if there is no client facing aspect, like a pharma rep that needs to go in and have handshakes in offices, then you could consider hiring a virtual role offshore. So there are a lot of companies now that are hiring virtual assistants or SDR roles that are like based out of the Philippines or Central and South America, because they're on the same time zone as the
Yeah, sure.
US,
Yeah.
right? So that can cost you, hiring a full-time person in the US can cost you anywhere from like 55K baseline, right? And if you go outside and you do that offshore, it's almost half. It's like $24,000, right? And if you basically need that person to just dial, then that, to me, in my honest opinion, you're going to get more bang for your buck as a smaller company to support you. But if you need somebody physically, then you're going to have to hire somebody, that, and I would start at a junior level. But yeah, I think it is key to have that, because while you are doing your marketing, who's going to close that for you? And you can't be doing all of that, because you could go to a conference, for example, and have 125 leads that you need to nurture, and that's a lot for one person to do.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, I think your first hire, in essence, full-time hire should be a salesperson, and you can outsource your marketing as you grow. I think nobody really, as a startup, should be hiring a full team of marketers internally. They should work with either a contractor or a smaller agency and understand what they need to then grow. And once they grow their pipeline, they can inject that back in and then potentially hire. I think social can be somebody that is a full-time role, but that is also based on if somebody physically needs to be
Mm.
there. Because if you're a tech company, that can also be outsourced, because you're not actually selling a physical product. Or even if you are, that person can take photos of it elsewhere, right? But if you're a brick and mortar, like a doctor's office, all of your content is going to come from that doctor's office. So it depends what industry you're in. But yes, I think an ideal for industry, I mean, in the B2B sector, but a salesperson is really important to have as a full-time role.
Yeah, I see that as the path forward for a lot. And a lot of these smaller companies struggle with organic growth, right? They
Yes.
do. They're all, they got to a great point through referrals, but they need to grow more. And private equity has come in and they're demanding organic growth. So you need true marketing. You got to develop your list, like you mentioned, and
Yeah.
do some local events. Grow organically is a marketing specialty. That's what
It
marketing is
is.
for.
Yeah. But I think in the beginning, like you can get people to help you to do that
Mm,
from an outside standpoint versus bringing them in house. I mean, even at the New York Times, like we didn't have people who ran our digital ads internally. It was expensive. It's expensive to build a digital house inside your own
interesting.
company. So we outsourced that to agencies who specialize in that. And we did try and bring it in and it wasn't cost effective.
Huh.
You see what I'm saying? Because it's like you're not constantly running ads all day long. You are running stop, running testing, running testing, running testing. So it isn't like a 24/7 situation and then you're going to have different campaigns based on different products, right? And then what if it fails? Then what do you do with that individual that you have overhead with for a product that you've discovered isn't working? I mean, we launched so many different products at the New York Times, and we had some great success with some, and some of them didn't make it past 3 months.
Mm,
So it's a gamble that you take. So that's why you're right. The types of roles that you hire and you need to think about are crucial.
mm,
And I think that's something that like VC funds, or when you raise capital, it's like all of a sudden you think you have all this money. It's like, oh, let me go hire like a chief marketing officer. You don't need a chief marketing officer. You need somebody that's boots on the ground and that's really going to build you from ground up. But from a strategic standpoint, nowadays you can hire somebody that's like a fractional chief marketing officer to give you that strategy. So you need to be crafty and clever in terms of how you're spending the money that you raise, or whatever funds you have, so that you can ensure you get the most return out of it.
and again, it's that first step of developing that foundation, that plan is really crucial.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because you're sending everybody to a place that is going to have that first blush and that first introduction of who you are. And if you're confusing people by your content, you don't have your language in the right place in terms of your offering, then that can really be a detriment to you.
Hmm,
So that needs to be in a good place. And then whatever you're saying on your website needs to translate to your socials,
mm,
and it all needs to be in sync with each other. And you can't imagine how many companies do not have that in
right.
sync.
Yeah.
It's like they say one thing on social and then another thing on their website and then another thing on LinkedIn. And then it's like you wonder why people are confused.
Mm, mm. So Sasha, I started my tech firm in the 90s and I was working, 14, 16-hour days. You know this now.
Yeah.
And I was not paying attention to myself and my diet. I was eating, you know, bad food and drinking a lot of soda. I got myself up to 340 pounds.
Oh
And
my gosh.
yeah, the doctor said to me, if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. My daughter was just born. So I
Yeah.
spent the next 6, 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People always ask me how, like there's some quick answer, like marketing. Oh, I just, there must be some quick solution, but there's not. You have to think, you have to plan. My simple answer to how I lost the weight is always discipline. That's it.
Yeah.
I got focus and I got discipline and I lost the weight. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life, Sasha. How?
Discipline and consistency. I mean, I think
Hmm.
with you nailed it. I mean, I think diet is a way of life. I mean, we can go into another rabbit hole of like, how diets have changed over the years from
Mm.
Atkins to I don't know what. It's like everybody needs to eat
South
like
Beach.
X amount of like protein. No,
Yeah.
forget the protein.
Yeah.
Dairy, dairy, dairy.
Yeah.
So it's a lifestyle. Discipline is a lifestyle. Like you wake up every morning and you brush your teeth, or I hope you wake up in the morning and you brush your teeth, unless you've been working 15, 16 hours and you just slam
Uh,
dunked into the bed and you didn't brush your teeth the night before. But it's consistency. It's habitual, right? So that is what it equates to at the end of the day. And I think if you are somebody that has that type of personality where consistency comes easier, or discipline, and trust me, even if you do, it doesn't, because it's a
mm,
mindset. And I think, for the entrepreneurs out there, they have that mindset because they started something, right? But of course, there is going to be obstacles along the way that's going to make you feel I can't do this, or I can't persevere, or I can't push through. And that's the consistency and the discipline that's going to keep you going no matter the noise that's around you. And I think that with everything in life, it's super important. And like I said, it becomes a habit. If you can do it, as they say, I think research wise, if you can do anything for 21 days, it becomes a habit. And so that discipline becomes easy.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, it's with everything. You have a goal, put it down, see how long it's going to take you to get there and what you're going to do to get there.
Yeah, consistency. I like what you said. It's habitual. I have this
Yeah.
ongoing thesis that discipline is a spectrum, and where people, because some people have a very militant, just we need less. I don't need discipline in my, and then some people just say, well, it's just self discipline. It's brushing your teeth in the morning. It's just,
Yes.
so I'm always fascinated by people's answers, and
Yeah.
there's no wrong answer, obviously.
No.
Yeah, yeah. What motivates you, Sasha?
What motivates me? Um, it's a that's a big question. Um, I can honestly say when I was working at a 9 to 5, I wasn't motivated to get up and go to the
Mm,
office,
mm,
and
mm,
I think that I think that there is no right or wrong answer as it comes to what you do in life is what makes you tick. Because as we talked about discipline and consistency, no person is created equal and everyone is different. You do have pockets and bundles of people that have the same type of habits and and desires and that type of thing, but I think you got to do what makes you happy, right? And for me, what keeps me motivated with my work and my business is the change that I want to make with people in the small business environment, right? And that gets me up. I
mm,
could have easily stepped out of a 9 to 5 and started an agency and said, I only want to work with enterprise, get 2 clients and be set,
mm, mm,
right? But I chose to work for the underdogs and the people that, need the most support. And if you think about it, small business owners and small businesses cover 75% of the GDP globally,
wow.
and not a lot of people are paying attention and focusing on them, right? Why shouldn't a small business have the same strategy that an enterprise company pays X million to get, like a McKinsey and company, to develop their strategy? That's
Mm,
unfair considering how much labor our small businesses support. So that's what motivates me. That's what gets me up. My family gets me up. My puppy that you heard in the background, motivates me. I think change and supporting people in this crazy time of our life, and just how everything is uncertain in so many ways but certain in so many ways. I think it's building that community and coming together and making a difference is what motivates me,
mm.
truly.
Impact.
Yeah, thank you. That is the exact word, is making an impact.
So, given that, how do you measure success?
Reach.
Hmm.
To be so much of a marketing person, but reach, I mean, I, as an agency, I can have so many clients, and then I just, I obviously have to hire to scale, to grow, and so on, right? But I think that I have a larger impact. I have a book coming out this summer, and that's going to allow me to touch more people who maybe can't afford to work with me, like the mom and pops bakery, or, and in conjunction with that, I will also be launching online courses that stem anywhere from 150 to 450 self-taught by videos, but it's a community that you log into and you support each other and you have questions, right? So that for me is going to give me the ability to reach more, both nationally and maybe potentially globally, versus just having the intimate relationships that I have with the smaller clients that I can support, versus like grow. I want to grow at scale, but I want to grow at scale to be able to make, even if I'm making 5% difference in how they set up their business from the beginning, then I have won, right? So that they don't go in a year from now after they've launched and spend $20,000 with an agency and see no return, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad out there, right? And there's a lot of people that will say that they can do things for you and you have to pay them X and then you don't see anything from it, right? And so I want to mitigate that and stop our small business founders and give them the education to know when to start, and how to do it.
Mm. Very cool, Sasha. Marketing. I work with a lot of small business. Like I keep saying this in tech. You mentioned 75% of the GDP. It's the engine of our worldwide economy, and
Yeah.
marketing is just so essential. I didn't have an appreciation for it when I started my company. As I get older, I have more and more. And these studies that come out and what you do and how it impacts sales. It's so necessary. And
Yeah.
I love what you're doing. Anybody listening, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me through my website. It's SAC as in Charlie HA and then my last name AWWA.com. And you can find my social channels on there. Or if you just want to head to my Instagram, it's SAMG as in George underscore HQ. And that's on Instagram, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Sasha Awa as well.
Very cool, Sasha. I really appreciate it. And please continue what you're doing. And if I find my way down there in southern Florida, I'll make sure we get
Please.
together and have a cup of tea.
Absolutely.
Or maybe a mojito in my
Yes.
yeah, I wouldn't
Or a
forget.
margarita.
Oh, margarita, certainly. You be well, Sasha. Thank you so much for your time.
Likewise. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Disciple Conversations.